All right, seeing none, the Chief Financial Officer's report. Tim?
Yes, for last year, the operating revenue was $22,216,000. It's about $1.3 million over budget. And in the report that I gave you, I tried to highlight some of the major items we've discussed before. That tax refunds in the operating funds were budgeted at $748,000. The final number that came in on tax refunds for the year was $23,000. So that's $724,000. That's over half of the $1.3 million. Special ed reimbursements, transportation reimbursements that we get from the state. The amounts that we received in fiscal 2014 included not only all of the payments for fiscal 2014, but also included some payments from fiscal 2013, which is why those items are over budget by a combined amount of about $220,000. We also had a school maintenance grant of $50,000 we received during the year. When we set the budget last year, we didn't know that the state was going to even have any school maintenance grants this year. So that was an additional amount that helped put us over budget. The operating expenditures for the year were $19,687,000. That's significantly under budget because of the fact that our salaries are accrued, and the salaries, this is the first year that instead of paying all the salaries out through June, we're paying salaries in July for the people from this past year. So that brought us in under budget on expenditures. That won't happen again because now we have expenditures, that run through the entire year. There was a question regarding accruals on expenditures.
Do you want to go through the rest of your report
Page.
before you get into the
Okay.
questions on the facility or the tentative budget, any of that?
Well, the tentative budget I wasn't going to talk about until later when it comes up.
All right, what about facility usage?
The facility usage chart was included in the packet. There were some questions about that last month. The chart shows you the amounts that we received and the percentages for each of the different venues. The total rentals of the facilities last year were $105,000. Almost half of that comes from renting either the field house or the gymnasiums. About 34% of it comes from either the pool or the stadium. So those are the three main areas where we collect rental income. The activity accounts, the report is in the packet. It does show some negative balances. I think there's 7 accounts that have negative balances. 6 of those are sports related activity accounts. Those negative balances will be cleared up with money that's coming in from the boosters or money that's coming from Riverside with the fundraiser that we did with them earlier in the year. The only other account that's negative is the class of 2016. The reason that's negative, as we've discussed before, is because we're starting to make payments on the prom venues for next year, and obviously won't be receiving any revenue until we start selling prom tickets next spring. As far as the questions that came up on whether or not the expenditures, whether it's only salaries or stipends that are accrued, we also have purchase services in many cases that are accrued. The insurance expenses that we have, sometimes we're making payments in July for the June insurance bills, out of district tuition, contract transportation, those kind of items where we can get bills after the end of the year. Supplies and capital would be the only items that wouldn't be accrued. They would be whatever's paid at the end of the year. Those are the only expenses that they're based on the budget. On page 8, the revenue and expenditure report, there was a couple of questions. One had to do with the fund number on debt service. Was brought up that it shows 70 as a fund number. That should be 30, and I'll have that changed. The other question had to do with the deficits that we had in a couple of the different funds in transportation and in debt service. The question was, do we have to make any transfers? There's enough money in those funds to cover the expenditures that we're going to have over the next few months, so that there isn't going to be any reason to make any loans. Those negative amounts are only deficits for the year, but they're not deficits in the fund balances that we have. On the expenditures, there was a question regarding transportation, why it was significantly over what it was last year. And the reason is really threefold. Part of it is the increases that we've had in rates from the contractor that we use through LADSI, which is Grand Prairie Transportation. There's increases in rates there. There was also some crossover in terms of the billing that came in from one year to the next. And we've had a significant increase in the out-of-district special education students that we have to transport to different schools, as well as an increase in the homeless students that we have to transport from where they're currently living to RB and back.
Is this something we should be looking at, though? We went from 383 to 373, 573. And I understand there's reasons for some of the increase, but do we need to take a closer look at our transportation costs? I mean, that's a $200,000 increase. Is there ways to do it a different way so it doesn't cost us as much?
Well, how much of that is related to special ed, and then how much is state funding you want that?
Out of the total, I think the total expenditures were $603,000. Probably over $400,000. I'm sorry. Over $400,000 is special ed transportation that we get a certain reimbursement from.
Because we are getting revenue increases also that went way up also in that time frame, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of keeping, I mean, the special ed transportation, which is the bulk of the expense, is through Grand Prairie Transportation. We don't decide on who the vendor is going to be for special ed transportation. That's done by LADSI. They go out and do the bidding.
Yeah, but last
get
month,
bids and-
you said we spent $50,000 on cabs for 2 students. I mean, have we looked to see whether there's other alternatives? Again, I understand that we want to transport it, we want to do our duty, but when it gets to be a $50,000 bill in 1 year, are we looking to see if there's other alternatives that might not cost as much, whether we're getting reimbursed or not?
We have a meeting set up with LADSI for later this month. I can add that to the agenda.
Okay.
Then on some of the individual accounts, on page 26, there was a question regarding the credit balances that went through in the health insurance and the dental insurance. That was during the course of the year, we charge all of the insurance costs to the general accounts that are on page 26. At the end of the year, we transfer money out. We have to transfer money into special education for insurance, as well as into the executive administration accounts. That's why there are negative balances there. And there is a bill that came through for June that wasn't paid in June for the dental insurance, but that's paid in July. There was a question regarding that account, whether or not there was some expenditures that carried over to the next year. On page 43, there was a question regarding the capital outlay and the executive administration account. We had some issues with the superintendent's desk, and there was money in his budget last year, so we went over on the capital account, but there were other accounts that were under budget. So that overall, the accounts came in under budget. Question regarding the management fees, the expenses that we have for the food service program with District 95.
Page 10.
I'm sorry, page 44. The budget was $215,000. The actual expenditure is $199,000. That is because that we haven't received the bills from Quest yet for the month of June. So that is an accrual situation. There's a question on page 46 about out-of-district tuition. We budgeted $200,000. The expenditures through the year were $80,000. Part of that was an accrual. We'll receive some bills in July for June, but part of it is we did come in under budget on that account.
And that's for regular ed, correct? So that's like if an alternative placement or,
Correct.
okay.
Well, it can be, that's for tuition that's being paid to other local educational agencies. Like if a student goes to another school district because they're hearing impaired and we don't provide that service, then we pay a tuition to that other school district.
Okay.
For that.
For services we can't provide here.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else, Tim?
And I think,
Can I ask one, I know you didn't do this on purpose, Tim. I still don't get this on page
Can't hear.
18. It shows that we came in almost 400,000, let's make sure almost $400,000 under budget for our debt service in the second installment. Is that accurate, or is there a reason that we would have come under?
I think that, that's an item where we, the current, tax levy, that number, 2,868,000 was overstated. I mean, that was too high. If we look at the prior year budget levy, that came in $221,000 over budget.
Okay.
So I think it's a matter of,
Any other questions for Tim?
Go
ahead.
You did the draft, the graph of the rental with the planned renovations going on the stadium, potentially in the gym. You gonna do an assessment of what potential impact that's gonna have on our revenue stream next year in the budget?
I did look at the stadium. I don't know that we have anything set up in the budget to work on the gyms. But we do have, obviously, the stadium set up. I looked at the fall and spring rentals for the stadium, and I reduced the rental budget next year by about $15,000 to cover that.
This is the summary for fiscal year 14, though, correct?
Correct.
You'll address, that question's been addressed in the budget for the 15-year.
Right, but that's the reason I raised that whole issue, and that's why that led to this, of where the revenues were coming from. But I want to make sure that we, as practice, if we're gonna put those assets out of service for a bit, what's the potential revenue gonna have a potential impact? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Tim?
Yeah, I do. So Tim, just looking at this, it seems like the expenditures were basically on target,
Yes.
except for the
money,
accounting
right,
accrual and all that. And the revenues were basically conservative because we brought in more revenue than we thought.
Correct.
But a lot of that, or more than half, is due to the fact that we didn't pay the tax refunds that we thought we would.
Correct.
Now, basically that money we save goes into our reserves.
Yes.
So in case next year we need to pay double, we could essentially cover that.
Yes, I mean, we talked last month about the fact that we're reducing those tax refund amounts, the budgeted amounts for that next year.
But by
But
recommendation by our lawyer, right?
Pardon?
By our tax lawyer gives us that
Yes.
recommendation.
Right, but the,
But you're right, if we do go over, we have money in reserves to cover that.
So overall, looking at this budget, our surplus is $500,000 if you discount that
Yes.
tax
it's
refund.
about-
So
yes.
that's actually a good thing.
Mhm.
Wouldn't, okay, good.
Okay, any other questions for Tim?